Welcome. I'm glad to be back with a new monster ranking for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. This time we are going to look at the slimy, mucky, goopy blobs of the D&D world. Oozes. The unfortunate truth is that 5e values the ooze creature type so little. There are a mere 4 ooze creatures in the monster manual, and all are found under the generic ooze heading. There are some other oozes in other books, but this creature type is the least utilized in the game, which I consider a real missed opportunity, as there are some fantastic oozes throughout the editions that really deserve to make a comeback. Now, I can admit that this creature type is somewhat more limited, and so it will never have as many entries as, say, monstrosities or undead or humanoids, and I'm totally fine with oozes remaining a forever underdog. But by the squelching scrotum secretions of Oblex, oozes deserve more entries in the official bestiaries of 5e. The origins of ooze creatures in games and media is a bit difficult to trace back, as it is not typically a creature that you would find in, say, mythologies or religions or old tales, which those are the roots of fantasy, along with sci-fi, horror, and other such genre fiction. There was no great slime of Samaria or accursed goo in ancient Greece. Beowulf and King Arthur and St. George didn't do battle against an amorphous, pseudopod-wielding sludge creature. The closest thing I've found is the Nupepo from Japanese lore, which first appears in texts in the 1600s, though probably had folk or oral tellings before that. It was a yokai, which in Japanese folklore and the Shinto religion are essentially spirits or ghosts or otherwise strange supernatural beings. The Nupepo isn't really an ooze, though. It's a somewhat blob-like creature, but it does have limbs and a heavily wrinkled face. Now, there is slime in the real world, of course, from animals that produce slime all over their bodies, like snails and slugs and frogs and octopuses, to actual slime molds such as the false puffball and dog vomit. These critters have certainly contributed to some degree of influence on the ooze monsters that we know and love. Slime also makes us think of mucus and other grotesque bodily fluids, also putrefying corpses, and also various kinds of foods that have different degrees of appeal, from kitchen mishaps to jelly and gel. I also thought of the Brothers Grimm fairy tale, The Juniper Tree, in which a woman chops up her stepson, cooks him into a black pudding, and feeds him to her husband, among other atrocities. Though I found out that this traditional black pudding dish is actually a kind of blood sausage, not really like a pudding. So there are certainly elements to draw from for slime monsters in bodily fluids and the culinary arts. When we get into the 1900s, things finally take off for the oozes. Creators begin concocting slime creatures of different kinds, from writers like H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard in the 20s and the 30s, to the movie The Blob from 1958. And its much superior remake in 1988. There is the episode of the original Star Trek called Devil in the Dark from 1967, in which they face a sort of blob-type creature, as well as the oil/slime monster from 1987's Creepshow 2, which was a far inferior movie to the original Creepshow. There was the Monster Blood book from the wildly successful Goosebumps children horror books. Slimes are a core monster from the massively popular Dragon Quest, aka Dragon Warrior as I knew it growing up, the video game series. I could go on and on. There really is no shortage of ooze monsters in modern day media, and you can bet that Dungeons & Dragons plays a part in contributing to the popularization of this gloopy kind of creature. So, oozes are not the deepest or most complex sort of creature, and 5e, for whatever reason, has majorly neglected them, so this ranking is going to be something of a shorter one. But I, as a lifelong lover of monsters, will always hope to see them around, or underneath, or in between the cracks, or whatever other little nook that they can squeeze into. Before we delve into the entries, I want to take a quick moment to mention something. You may or may not know this, but I have come back to creating narrated adventures. Yes! After years of hiatus, I have released a new series called Trials of the Neophyte. If you haven't checked this out yet, make sure to do so. There is a link down in the video description. This is a different approach to D&D and role-playing. It's not a group playing D&D. It's a module focused in 100% on the game. On the art, the maps, the minis, the soundtrack, the dice rolls shown in the subtitles. There's no table chatter, there's no delays, it's just pure immersion. And you, the viewer, influence the character's decisions with your comments, like a vote. So this is truly a living adventure experience, where even I, the creator, don't know exactly what's going to happen. The setting is brand new, it's called Labyrinthine Gardens, and it is a unique blend of ancient plus an almost sci-fi fantasy with an element of post-apocalypse in there. It feels like classic D&D, but with a twist. You just have to see it for yourself, so enjoy Trials of the Neophyte. It is a traditional tabletop RPG gaming in its purest form, combined with an innovative, almost audiobook type presentation. Now, let's descend into the dank and moldering cavern, where sticky and slimy things slug about, hungry to devour everything in their path. I expected to find an ooze or two in F tier, but actually there are none. I attribute this to the fact that there are just so few ooze monsters in 5e, but hey, no F tier entries is sort of a good thing. So we actually start things off in low D tier with the Oblex spawn, which is part of a larger cycle of Oblex ooze creatures. When I first saw the artwork, I recognized it from 3rd edition's Monster Manual 5. That's right, 3E/3.5 had 5 monster manuals, plus the Fiend Folio, and some other books that had a bunch of monsters in them, such as Libris Mortis, Sandstorm, Stormrack, Fiendish Codex 1 and 2, Oriental Adventures, and others. So this artwork is actually recycled from 3E's Monster Manual 5, the monster Graveyard Sludge, which is a real shame because the Graveyard Sludge is a really cool monster. So getting back to Oblexes, they are some of the most complex and intelligent oozes in the game. Where did they come from? Well, Mind Flayers. That's right, the Mind Flayers are at it again. They keep experimenting upon and warping creatures, who then often escape and get away. Githyanki, Githzerai, Quotoa, Quaggoths, Intellect Devourers, Mind Witnesses, and more. Oblex oozes are known for absorbing personalities of their victims. When an adult Oblex cannot hold any more absorbed personalities, it splits off a little chunk that becomes a new Oblex spawn, a tiny-sized ooze creature. So I'm taking that as meaning once the adult is at full capacity on personalities, every single new intelligent creature it slays causes it to spawn another Oblex spawn. I'm not sure though, the lore really doesn't specify. The lowly Oblex spawn is not capable of absorbing personalities yet, so it functions really just as a simple ooze with an amorphous body and a pseudopod slam that deals both bludgeoning and psychic damage. Like all Oblexes, it has an aversion to fire, and if it gets burned, it has disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks until the end of its next turn. That's really all I can say about the Oblex spawn. It's connected to some good lore and an interesting monster cycle, but it is far simpler and lower tier than its older counterparts, which we'll get into later on. Ochre Jelly. In mid-D tier, we kick off the first of the 4 oozes from the monster manual. It is a fairly simple and straightforward creature. It's a slime that gloops along looking to eat. Its natural acid dissolves flesh, but nothing tougher. Its speed is a paltry 10 feet, so it makes it quite a slow creature, and being just a blob, it's incredibly easy to hit with attacks. It can stick to walls and ceilings, and if subjected to lightning or slashing damage, it splits into 2 small-sized ochre jellies. There isn't much to say about this monster. It's a mindless glob of living snot, gross and cool enough for what it is. The monster manual lumps all of the ooze lore together, which does give us a few details to take inspiration from, such as the ooze's niche in a dungeon or cavern ecology. The lore also drops the name of the demon lord Oblex, aka the Faceless Lord, who some scholars believe is responsible for the ooze monsters in general in the D&D world. Responsible is a loose term. It's more like he spawned the ooze monsters, whether inadvertently or intentionally. This catch-all origin is debated by scholars on both sides of the issue, but one thing that is for certain is that Oblex is one of the few beings in existence that can readily command and control oozes at will, which otherwise are just too mindless to be commanded without employing some kind of special magic or some supernatural ability. I mean, spells like Charm Monster and Dominate Monster, they're very powerful, but they don't affect most oozes, so you need something special to be able to command them. At best, NPCs and intelligent monsters usually just come up with clever ways to corral or cage in or slightly train oozes as crude dungeon guardians and waste removal. Gray Ooze, a very simple, medium-sized ooze that is just a basic stony gray color. It is amorphous, it's extremely slow, and attacks with an acidic pseudopod. Its natural acid is strong enough to corrode even metal. Weapons that strike it become corroded, and when it hits a creature wearing non-magical metal armor, it corrodes the armor. So it has a bit of natural camouflage and this metal equipment corroding effect that certainly will impact the character's tactics, but it is a very slow creature and extremely simplistic in the area of role-playing. It fills a niche as a very low-level dungeon bottom feeder, or almost like a terrain hazard in a way, but don't expect much more from it. That is unless we're talking about the psionic Grey Ooze variant, which we'll find a bit higher in the ranking. Oh, and I should also mention the huge Grey Ooze from the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. It is essentially the same as the Grey Ooze, except it is much more powerful. It's huge size, and it has 2 additional abilities. It can temporarily enlarge itself to gargantuan size, which doubles the damage it deals, and it can turn invisible, similar to the invisibility spell, once per short rest or long rest. So I would consider that one actually a little bump up higher than the baseline Grey Ooze. Inkling Mascot. In upper D tier is the Inkling Mascot, a floating, tiny-sized ooze from the Strixhaven setting, which is Dungeons & Dragons' take on the Magic the Gathering setting that is inspired by Harry Potter and the whole Hogwarts and Wizarding World thing. It is what it is, folks. Gone are the days of D&D embracing gritty swords and sorcery settings. Now we get things inspired by Harry Potter, anime, Marvel, video games. Will the game come back around to more serious and mature themes? Well, Considering D&D earned a record-breaking $1.3 billion in 2021, I don't see that they have any incentive to do so. My sympathy goes out to the Whitebeards, the old guards, the history buffs, and the lovers of adult fantasy. Sorry guys, but mainline D&D left this camp a long time ago. I'm staying mostly in this camp though, because I love the darker, deeper, more traditional fantasy, so hopefully my contributions make some kind of difference for you. I suppose this is a perfect moment for a quick segue. I also created an inky ooze creature sometime back, the Ink of Pain. The official version of this creature is found in my book, Esper's Emporium of Esoterica, which is now available in both hardcover and PDF. When adventurers first encounter this ooze, they typically believe it to be a black pudding. If they engage the slime in combat, they quickly discover that the creature absorbs their assaults. Rather than suffer damage, it invigorates, moving more swiftly. The inky monster seems unstoppable. All the more horrifying is how the creature emulates the shapes and sounds of creatures in agony, a veritable mockery of all those the ooze has consumed throughout its existence. Other oozes in the book include the horrific flesh ooze, the carcass-wearing Doozeldog, the mage-consuming spell-drinker ooze, and the gargantuan soul-trapping Zymocratoris. If you're curious about these and the loads of other content for both players and GMs found in the Emporium, check out the link down in the video description. Back to the Inkling mascot. These tiny black ooze things are summoned by professors who are creating writing workshops and by students who want company as they stay up late studying. The Inkling's body serves as an endless source of ink, which I imagine would have quite the economic implication, considering how valuable ink is in a medieval/Renaissance type setting. The Inkling is unlike many oozes, not just because it has a funny cartoon face, but because it floats. Yes, it has a flying speed of 30 feet and can hover. It also is smart enough to understand a language, but it cannot speak. Maybe it just writes. Its melee blot attack deals psychic damage, and once per day it can attempt to blind a creature with ink for 1 round. Oh, and due to its dark coloration, it can attempt to hide in darkness or dim light as a mere bonus action. If you're looking for a cutesy ooze familiar for your cartoon Hogwarts game, the Inkling mascot is perfect for you. Moving on to C tier, we're going to find creatures now that have a balance of downsides and upsides. This is the type of tier that we typically find a lot of entries in. Technically, I can say the same holds true for the oozes, though there just aren't a lot of entries in general due to there not being many oozes in 5e at this point. So, we now look at the Psychic Grey Ooze, which is a variant of the baseline Grey Ooze. It has dwelt long enough near psionic, telepathic creatures such as Mind Flayers that it develops a supernatural sort of mind and limited psionic powers. The example Psychic Ooze given in the Monster Manual has an intelligence score of 6, which is just a hair above the typical ogre, though it does not have any kind of language or telepathy. And it has a Psychic Crush ability that deals psychic damage, with the target making a DC 10 intelligence saving throw for half. It's still quite a simple creature, but with a modicum of personality and intelligence that gives it a layer of depth beyond the typical Grey Ooze. I think a lot more could have been done with this concept, but alas, it just didn't get much space or attention in the Monster Manual. Black Pudding. One of the mere 4 ooze entries in the Monster Manual, the Black Pudding is pretty cool for being such a simple creature. Its strong points are its mechanics and its grotesque, tarry, inky aesthetic. Like most oozes, it is an amorphous, hungry blob that lurks in the dark of dungeons, slugging along the floor or clinging to walls or ceilings, blending in with the shadows. Creatures that strike it find its acid splatters onto them, and even worse, damages and corrodes weapons, eventually destroying them. In a like manner, when the ooze strikes a creature, it damages the target's armor. It's similar to what we saw already with the gray ooze. Another curious trait of the black pudding is similar to the ochre jelly, in that if it is struck by lightning or slashing damage, instead of being hurt, it splits into 2 oozes of half the size, but with the same offensive capabilities. It begins as large size, then can split into 2 medium oozes, each of which can split into 2 small oozes. I think one of the best ways to use this ooze would be in combination with a flesh golem that heals when it is exposed to lightning, and some other creature that produces lightning bolts, like a spellcaster NPC or even a living lightning bolt. Alas, a cool style and a few unique traits are about all this ooze has going on. In the end, it's just a mindless blob of slime that creeps along trying to prey upon whatever it can. If adventurers can keep it at bay, it is so slow and with such a low AC that it is doomed to be quickly dispatched. Gelatinous Cube. The gelatinous cube skirts the line between goofy and cool, and if you ask me, it falls onto the cool side. Sure, some artistic renditions of the monster make it look like a giant cartoon block of jello, but others keep it in the realm of grim pulp fantasy. Something I really like about art from older D&D editions is that it often showed the monsters putting adventurers in real peril or even seizing upon them. 5e has moved away from this style, and the monsters are either these neutral case study poses, or the characters are these ultra badass superheroes who are all confident. Yet, the gelatinous cube is an exception. Even in the 5e monster manual, it shows the ooze with the skeletal remains of a warrior suspended inside it. It has 2 main features, a transparency trait and an engulf ability. The transparency makes it nearly invisible until it starts moving and attacking. There's nothing quite like an unsuspecting adventurer bumbling straight into a gelatinous cube. And the engulf ability does what you would expect, trapping the characters or other prey inside its 10-foot by 10-foot slimy body. It deals a surprisingly high amount of acid damage for just a CR2 monster. That is, assuming it can keep a character engulfed, and said character doesn't just escape or get pulled out by an ally. It functions almost like a cross between a monster and a terrain hazard or a trap, and I actually love that. The ooze is so slow and with such a low AC that if a character does get away, they're gonna outmaneuver it and slay it at a range really easily. Like with many oozes, its downsides are that it is a super simple creature with no personality or motivations or storytelling. That is okay. Not every monster needs to do those sorts of things. I think it can be eerie and creepily effective to have a monster that is nothing but a crawling, hungry slime, like a terrifying force of nature. The gross underbelly of nature. There's nothing wrong at all with a monster being simplistic in the area of social interaction and persona and such, but it will always hold it back in these rankings when we compare it to things like vampires, mind flayers, sphinxes, and dragons. Speaking of dragons, our next creature is the Dragonblood ooze. This creature is an ooze that comes into being from dragon's blood in an arcane laboratory or an alchemist workshop, perhaps as an accident, perhaps spontaneously, or perhaps as a result of mad experimentation. It is a simple creature. It does what oozes do best. It's glooping along, attacking with its own slimy body, even trying to hold the shape of a dragon at times, and spewing acidic gel instead of a true breath attack. Its pseudopod attack grapples automatically on a hit, and the grabbed creature takes ongoing acid damage as long as it remains in the caustic clutches. All in all, this is a fairly simple, straightforward ooze monster with a touch of a draconic theme. Now we're going to be moving up to B tier, where as always things make a shift into more pros instead of cons, more upsides instead of downsides. There is unfortunately only one entry here, but it is a really good one. Slithering into low B tier is the Slithering Tracker. This creature actually has some interesting lore. It comes into existence when a person undergoes a ritual performed by a lich, a hag, or some other dark spellcaster. The subject must willingly be transformed into this watery slime monster. Why would someone choose this? Well, typically for revenge. Once the person is changed into the Slithering Tracker, it can flow upon the ground, along walls and ceilings, and even swim, all much faster than a usual ooze can. It is a highly sneaky monster, and it has expertise in stealth and survival, also known as the tracking skill, and it can appear as a mere puddle of water. Its stealth is even better when it's in water, gaining advantage and being able to hide as a bonus action. It grabs onto a victim, restrains the target, and simultaneously drowns it and drains its blood. As a fantastic defense property, while attached to a target, whenever the Slithering Tracker takes damage, the restrained creature takes half of that damage. This creature has a much better AC and speed than most oozes, and it retains its intelligence and understanding of language, though it cannot speak. And after years of being trapped in a silent, slimy form, it may very well fall onto a madness and indiscriminate killing spree due to its bloodthirsty nature. And that's it for B tier. One creature, though, as I mentioned, quite a worthwhile creature. Moving up to A tier, we find a creature that is even better still. It's in high A tier that we come across the adult Oblex and the elder Oblex. They have come a long way since the meager Oblex spawn, now possessing amazing mechanics and some of the most unique features I've ever seen in an ooze. Oblexes are drawn to highly intelligent creatures most of all, so wizards beware. The sharper and more robust the mind, the more nourishing the target. Some Oblexes still serve Illithid masters, so if characters entangle with them, there is a chance that Illithids will end up getting involved as well. Unlike most oozes, the Oblexes have proficiency in a few saving throws and skills, representing their strong minds and the types of knowledge they have gained from absorbing the personalities of sapient creatures. The adult Oblex has some innate spells: 5th level Charm Person, 3rd level Hold Person, Color Spray, and Detect Thoughts. These spells really fit this ooze's theme, and they have good potential both in and out of combat. As a bonus action, the adult Oblex can create a copy of a creature whose memories it has stolen. It makes this simulacrum from its own slimy body, and this sort of puppet can move up to 120 feet away from the ooze. It remains connected by a minuscule trail of slime that needs at least 1 inch of space to fit through, and a faint smell of sulfur emanates from this clone. This slime puppet can alter its shape, color, and texture so well that it really appears just like the person or the creature the Oblex is imitating. Now, when I say puppet, keep in mind that this imitation creature actually is the Oblex, literally just part of its own body that it has extended and reshaped. It's creepy, and it's awesome in many ways. Again, useful for role-playing type scenes in which the ooze impersonates someone and speaks to the characters, or even in battle, with the ooze occupying 2 different spaces up to 120 feet apart from each other. Actually, it can be even in more spaces than that simultaneously. A typical adult Oblex can have up to 1d4 plus 1 impersonated creatures. For an attack, it can make a slam with a pseudopod, which deals bludgeoning and psychic damage like we saw with the lower spawn version, and it can combo the slam with Eat Memories, its other signature feature. The target of Eat Memories must make a Wisdom saving throw, and on a failure it takes psychic damage and becomes memory drained. This imposes a 1d4 penalty to the target's ability checks and attack rolls, with this penalty die increasing in size by 1 step each additional time the creature is affected by eat memories. So it goes to d6, d8, d10, d12, and if the penalty die reaches 1d20, the target falls unconscious. After eating a subject's memories, the Oblex learns all languages the subject knows and gains all proficiencies it has, except for saving throw proficiencies. The Elder Oblex is just as good as the adult, even a tiny bit better. Really, they're quite similar, just the Elder has more options and is bigger and stronger. Its baseline stats are higher, as it is a CR10 monster compared to the CR5 adult. It can cast even more innate spells on top of the ones that the adult has. It also has Confusion, Dimension Door, Dominate Person, Fear, Hallucinatory Terrain, Hold Monster, Hypnotic Pattern, and Telekinesis. Most of these spells are enchantment or illusion magic, which is quite fitting for the Oblex, and they are some fantastic spells for a variety of reasons. The Elder Oblex can have up to 2d6 plus 1 sulfurous impersonations extended from its huge size body, and its melee attacks and eat memories feature all do substantially more damage than the adult Oblex. There are sadly no oozes in S tier, so the Oblex is the reigning king as of this moment. And coming into this ranking, I basically knew the Oblex would be the top ooze, as it has that wonderful mixture of stylish, thrilling abilities. It's great for role-playing. Its lore really is not bad. It can have so many identities and personalities, which make it a very versatile and variable kind of creature, though it is held back from the highest score in versatility because ultimately it is still just an ooze that wants to eat you, or in this case, eat your memories. So it's never going to have the highest wealth of different motivations and goals like a truly top score versatility creature has. I also appreciate how the adult and Elder Oblex's DCs are sufficiently high and will definitely challenge the characters. There are a lot of 5e monsters whose spell and special ability DCs seem like they're 2 or maybe even 3 points too low, and that really works against how challenging they're supposed to be. A CR3 Mummy's Dreadful Glare is only DC 11. That would be like playing a 5th or 6th level wizard with a spell DC of only 11. The CR7 Oni's spell DC is 13. Meh. The Beholder, which is the monster icon from the Monster Manual of 5e, has an IRA DC of 16. It's not a bad DC for Challenge 13 monster, but it isn't great either. It really should be like 18. The Beholder's IRA DC is based on intelligence, like a wizard's spell DC. It has an intelligence score of 17. Again, that's pretty good, but it's not quite what it should be. A first level character can pretty easily have a 17 in their main ability score. Imagine being a 20th level spellcaster, your intelligence is only 17, your spell DC is only 16. A 20th level spellcaster is probably going to have a spell DC of like 20 or 21. I don't mean to go down a rabbit hole with this, but the point is, I really appreciate the Oblex having appropriately good DCs, with the CR5 Adult Oblex having DC 15, and the CR10 Elder Oblex having DC 18. I have to say this is one of the best and most interesting ooze creatures I've ever seen. I love it, and I applaud the designers here. Actually, there is a bit of real-world lore that goes along with the creation of the Oblex. In 2017, a boy named Nolan Whale, sponsored through the Make-A-Wish Foundation, met with the designers who were working on Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. The creative young Nolan provided the concept for the Oblex, which turned out as quite a success. You can also see his character Balthran Ironheart on page 82 of the book. I wish Balthran would have been mentioned or quoted in the lore of the Oblex. That would have been great. So that brings us to the end of the Oozes, a lamentably underutilized creature type in 5e. I like all the Oozes, even the simple low-tier ones. They all have their place in the overall ecology of the game. I just wish there were more. But until we get them, I'm happy to make my own Oozes when I have the time. I can only speak for myself, but I think there are lots of things that can be done with Oozes to create all kinds of strange and wondrous monsters. Maybe I'll do a Bard stream where we conceptualize an ooze monster together. Until then, watch out for slimy doom, and as always, may your adventures be many.